Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I want to tell you a story of my childhood, of my younger years. It was 10th grade. I was a sophomore, right, in high school. And I had never, ever gone to a school dance. And I had no intention of going to a school dance. But then, in 10th grade, I had met someone who was like a cool kid. And up to that point, all my friends were kind of like basement dweller nerds, kind of like me, hoodie gremlins, if you will. And the fact that this cool kid extended his friendship to me made me feel really special. It's like, wow, this guy wants to be my friend, and he's so cool. So anyway, I started hanging out with him, and he started hanging out with us. And I counted him among my friends at the time. And I still would today. But I started hanging around different people. In that time, I wouldn't touch a girl with a 10-foot pole. Not because I hated them, but because I had been learning about the importance of waiting to get into a relationship until you're ready. From a Christian upbringing that was really ingrained into my head. And so, if I sat next to a girl in class, I could talk to them, but I didn't hang out with them. It's just not something I did. I just hung out with my boys. We played video games, ate pizza, that kind of thing. That's what I did. And so I started hanging out with this cool guy, and then there was a girl in my high school history class who I sat next to. And then there was another girl. And he invited me out to ice cream or frozen yogurt with them. So we would get frozen yogurt every other week or something like that, and we would hang out. And then homecoming, which is I don't remember what kind of special dance it is. It's some dance. I don't remember what it is or why it's special. But he invited me out in a big group of people. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go. This is a cool opportunity to hang out with the cool kids. So I go. And we go to Olive Garden at first. And there's guys and girls there. He's got a date. But I didn't have a date, and I didn't want a date. That was my understanding, was I was just going to hang out at the dance, and we were going to have a good time as a bunch of friends and stuff like that. And so I go, and we're at Olive Garden, and we go to the dance, and everyone's having a good time at the dance, and I'm kind of hanging out on the side. Hello again. But I am definitely not dancing. I have no intention to dance whatsoever. And I don't expect anyone to ask me to dance. I'm just hanging out. And it was pretty boring, all things considered. But then, one of the girls from my high school, or my history class, comes up. And she asked me to slow dance with her. And it, caught me so off guard. Because as a greasy 10th grader, I was not in that mental sphere whatsoever. I was I don't want to have anything to do with girls romantically or relationally, dating wise. And so I assumed that their perspective was the same of me, but it definitely wasn't. Coming to find out that this girl liked me, obviously. Looking back on it now, it was clear as day, but at the time, I really didn't see it coming. And it was the most emotional turmoil I had been in a long time was that moment. And I felt really bad, but I really didn't want to dance with her, because I was I don't want to give her the wrong idea, the wrong impression, yada, yada, yada. And it's it's not I was necessarily walking through these things logically in my head. I was just so uncomfortable. Anyway, I decide that I will go slow dance with her. And dude, it was probably the most awkward moment of my life, if not of all time. Like, just extreme awkwardness, because it was like, I don't know this girl. Like, I know her as a friend, but like, I don't want to give her any ideas. I don't want to make this night miserable for her or super awkward for her. But I was like as a high schooler, touching a girl around the waist or the hips was like something you just didn't do. Like, I was not ready for that, even that level of physical contact. So like, I tried to get by just putting my arms on her shoulders, and then I remember she moved my hands down to her waist. It was like one of those like super awkward, like, I don't know, childhood romance drama comedies. I don't even know what you call it, but it was like it was from a movie. Anyway, so I slow dance with her. It's like the most awkward slow dance of all time. Then I walk away. She probably is like, this is super uncomfortable. Obviously, I was like, this is super uncomfortable. And I felt terrible. Like, just really uncomfortable. And so then I leave. And like, at that time, every time I would think back to that moment, like, I would almost like be teleported back into that moment, and I would feel the same emotions that I felt at that time. And like, obviously not to the same degree, but it was like a scar of my history, of my past, of like, oh my gosh, that was so awkward, that was so uncomfortable. So I remember talking with my mother about it, and she kind of was like, well, if you want to think back on that memory and not feel that negative way about it, you have to work through the memory. You have to work through what happened in your head, and you have to reconcile it and understand it and accept it. So she taught me how to kind of work through a memory and to like accept that it happened and understand that it's all right now. Like, yeah, you could say that it was uncomfortable at the time, or even if there was a mistake made at the time, there's no need for it to really affect you today. Like, you can just learn from it and move on. And it was a more involved process than that. Like, really, really working through each step of the memory and the emotional and feeling how it felt to think about that and just dwell on it. But at the end of the day, I learned how to move on from emotional, I don't know, damage, I guess you would call it. So years later, and from that moment on, whenever anything kind of uncomfortable would happen, I would kind of try and do that process as quickly as possible to get over it, because I realized that when something bad happens to you, when something doesn't go your way, or when you feel a certain emotion and you're tempted to react a certain way based on that emotion, like, you need to kind of do this process to understand what happened so that you can react in a non-emotional way, right? It's like, it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to be confused, but like, acting on those emotions will often get you in trouble. And so kind of reconciling why you feel that way and then moving on quickly allows you to, act logically. Like, at that dance, if I was able to do that process then and there, I could have acted completely differently and been okay. The truth is, I probably would have needed a completely different understanding about the situation I was in at the time, but I definitely could have handled it differently. So anyway, years later, I'm at Buffalo Wild Wings at a friend's birthday, and I didn't know it, but I was kind of the designated driver. He was drinking, or multiple people were drinking, but I don't drink, so they didn't tell me, nor did I think they expected me to, but it was just like, hey, you haven't been drinking, you can drive. So I drove my friend, whose birthday it was, home, and it was all fine until I was parking at his apartment complex, and I kind of scratched his door on this white post. I like ran into this post. It wasn't like anything huge. It was just a scratch on the door, but it was still the first time I had ever like damaged the car, I guess, and let alone damage someone else's car. So I felt terrible. I was like, oh my gosh, dude. I just scratched this dude's door. I feel terrible. And I kind of did that process in my head of like, okay, you did something, you made a mistake, and you're processing it immediately. What can you do now to make the situation better? Does feeling bad about it right now and feeling like overwhelmed at the mistake you just made, does that help the situation in any capacity at all? And I was like, no, not really. So I kind of tried to do away with that emotion as much as I could and just focus on what needed to be done. I apologized and I was like, if anything, if you need me to pay for it, I'm totally down. Just let me know how much it costs, and I'll take care of it because it was my mistake. But I realized that that's all that needed to be said. That's all that needed to be done, right? There was no point in like sitting there and being like, oh, you made such a grave mistake. Like, you're such an idiot. How could you do this? There's no point in feeling any of that. It's like you just need to focus on what needs to be done and then get that done. There's no point in dwelling and wallowing in the negative emotion. And that is true in so many different areas of our lives where we feel a certain way about something and we're tempted to just feel that way. And it's like, I feel like people are taught, or because they're not taught any different, people come to a belief or an understanding that their emotions know best for them. It's like, because you feel some way means you should act a certain way. And the truth is, your emotions don't know what's best for you. Like, your emotions are just that. They're emotions. They are a feeling. And it's okay to feel that way. But it's also extremely important to understand that just because you feel something doesn't mean that you should act upon that feeling. In fact, oftentimes, the opposite is true. Because you feel a way means you should probably act a completely different way to what you feel. Like, if you're angry, acting out of anger is just going to get you in more trouble. If you fail, acting out of depression or sadness and giving up and quitting is not going to help you get where you want to get in life. And, it applies to different emotions in different ways. But I think the core of the subject is something I would refer to as emotional intelligence, right? Like, how good are you at understanding yourself and your own emotions and how you feel and how certain things make you feel, and then how do you react based on those feelings? Are you able to recognize the emotions when they happen and then use that as a trigger to act, with your brain? And it doesn't always have to be negative emotions. Last time I was talking about relationship stuff, and infatuation is a very powerful emotion as well. But acting upon infatuation can put you into situations that you definitely don't want to be in, right? And I guess the only way to increase your ability to not act out emotionally is to just practice it, to recognize your emotions as they happen. But I feel like it's a absolutely vital aspect to communication and decision making is emotional intelligence. And there's really no way to fast track it besides just making a point. But there are so many relationships and so many people that I've seen, because when you get good at evaluating it in yourself, you can kind of start to observe it in other people. Not that you necessarily need to go to people and be like, hey, you need to work on this. Get it together. But you can see how destructive it is in other people's relationships, between parents and their children, or between spouses. It's like There's so many relationships that are in absolute disrepair because both parties are acting emotionally. And when the other person does something they don't like that makes them angry, they act out of that emotion instead of like doing away with the emotion and saying, okay, why did you do this? Let's talk about it. Let's understand it. And sometimes, if the other person isn't willing to have that conversation, it's important to just walk away and to understand that, you know, they're not ready right now, and that's okay. You can't force them to be. You can't make them ready. And I kind of went with this mentality to an extreme degree in my younger years, where I kind of became, or my goal was to kind of become an emotionless mummy, a husk, just a robot, fully and only operating upon logic and reason. Does not compute. Emotion does not compute. And it kind of made me a bit calloused to people. Like, I probably came off that way. Because I kind of was like, my emotions are bad. And there's definitely going too far in this aspect where you just put to death every emotion. And I want to make it very clear, our emotions is part of what makes us human. And feeling that emotion is important. And it's not to say that there's never a situation where it's wrong to act emotionally. There's plenty of times when you're sad, and it is appropriate to be sad, and you should be sad, and you should allow that sadness to overtake you, and you should just be in that moment and grieve for whatever is lost. Like, that is an absolute okay thing and a good thing. It is okay to get angry over things that are wrong, bad things that happen that make you angry. It's okay. It's important to make sure that the things that are making you angry should make you angry. You shouldn't, and you can get angry about a bunch of trivial things that don't matter. But when something comes down the pipeline that does make you angry and should make you angry, that anger can drive you to rectify the situation, which is good if you're going about it in a healthy way. If you go about it in, a rage-filled fury, destructive warpath that just destroys everyone and everything in your way, that can end up doing more harm than good. But if it's the, whoa, hello, whoa, what? That's crazy sounding. Yeah. But there are some emotions I feel that pretty much never have a place. Like jealousy, like comparison, like comparing yourself to others and then feeling bad about your comparison to others. Pretty much doesn't have any real purpose or use that I can think of. I mean, maybe it can light a fire under your butt to want to get your act together and do something. It was a pelican. But yeah, don't go too far. Go just far enough. Be smart with it. But I think this is a subject that a lot of people don't really want to touch on. And I think a lot of people, again, assume that because they feel a way, it's appropriate to act based on that feeling. And that can get you into a lot of trouble. And from my observations and my own experiences, I know that when I've let myself go because I felt a certain way, it hasn't made things better at all. In fact, it has actually always made things worse. For me, I guess the most recent thing would be I don't know, I guess it would just, I don't even know how I would describe it as an emotion besides calling it fun. Like, if working hard isn't fun because it's hard work and you're not getting that dopamine response firing off in your brain, pew, 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 and you have other things that you can do, you're just trying to entertain yourself. You're trying to have fun. You're trying to chase that dopamine response. And to some extent, that is like the core reason behind any form of addiction, right? A drug addiction, pornography addiction, being addicted to a relationship, toxic relationship. It's like all that comes down to wanting that dopaminergic response. I think that's how you call it. When what you need to do is, batten down the hatches and get to work. At least in my example, that's what I need to do. I need to be like, okay, I want to have fun here. I want to goof off and binge watch YouTube or play whatever fun game instead of editing, because like editing's a pretty boring process a lot of the time, at least the way I edit. And the times that I've let myself fall into that, I have, kind of spiraled down into a complacent, lazy lifestyle that isn't fulfilling and that doesn't satisfy. It's fun in the moment for a while, but like you get to a point where it just doesn't feel good anymore, and you realize that maybe it never was really good, even though it felt good at a time, because you weren't progressing. And so, like, shifting your mind to observe things differently is kind of the only way that you'll ever get to a point where you can be consistent in not giving in to what's easy and what's fun. Whether it's working out, shifting your mindset to like, okay, if I'm in pain, depending on the severity of the pain, while I'm lifting weights or while I'm running or doing cardio or whatever, chances are that pain is the actual process of breaking down and building back up stronger. And so it's a good thing, even though it hurts, even though it doesn't feel good. And so conditioning your mind to think differently about that pain is essential in being consistent in building your body up. In the same way that mentally, with like working hard at something creative or whatever, like editing, there's plenty of times where your mind will go, this isn't fun, this isn't fun, this isn't fun. But then conditioning your mind to say, sure, right now I may not be having fun, but the end product I will be proud of. And that's more entertaining, that's more rewarding than just stopping and goofing off and playing whatever I want to right now. Like, being focused on a task, on an objective, on a goal, and accomplishing that goal is so much more rewarding and satisfying and constructive to one's life rather than just doing whatever it is you want to do. Not to say that it's not a good thing to take breaks and to enjoy life. Like, that's totally fine. Like, you want to go on a hike, go on a hike. You want to watch a YouTube video for fun, watch a YouTube video for fun. But you can get into a bad habit where you're doing it too much. Anything, where it's become kind of the focus. And it's like there are times where I'll be spiraling in a YouTube tornado of just watching videos that don't matter, that aren't adding anything to my life. It's like, okay, you want to watch a game or two? That's fine. Enjoy the game or two. But don't sit there for 6 hours straight just binge watching YouTube because it feels good. It's like, that's not going to get you anywhere. And so I would also extend that aspect into emotional intelligence as well. Like, there's an emotional aspect to wanting to entertain yourself, for sure. And there's an emotional aspect to working hard and being diligent in the areas that you need to be diligent in. Yeah, the only way to get there is to just do it. Is to just recognize in the moment when you're kind of not doing what you want to be doing, or you're acting out of an emotional feeling that isn't healthy, you have to just snap yourself out of it. Or if you're in a position where you have someone who like criticizes you when you're doing something bad, like an overly critical brother or sister or parent, like you can use that to your advantage, even though they might not be perfect in trying to correct you, right? And maybe they're not even right in calling you out. But if they are calling you out anyway and there's nothing you can do about it, if you are in a position where you're like not doing what you want to do, if you're acting immature or acting out of a negative emotion and they call you out on it, to accept that call out and to not make you even angrier. To be like, oh, okay. You know, they may not be right in every aspect here about what I'm doing, but I can accept that this criticism is coming from a place of at least some truth. Like when I look at negative comments on YouTube, most of my comments are overwhelmingly positive, but every once in a while I read a negative comment. And instead of being like, this guy's stupid, he doesn't know what he's talking about, I try to look at the perspective, okay, why would they be saying this? You know, why would they feel the need to let me know something that is intended to make me feel bad? And sometimes it's just because people don't like seeing other people succeed, and that makes them feel bad. You know, other people being successful or other people working hard makes someone who isn't working hard feel bad, as opposed to inspiring them, right? And, you know, those are two different responses. You see someone who's on their Sigma male grind set, that can either make you angry and criticize them. They don't know what they're doing. You know, they're going overboard. They work too hard. Or it can be like, dang, I need to get my act together. Let's flip and get up and go. Not to say that you have to be, you know, identical to these people, but there's always room for growth, room for improvement. And our emotions get us into trouble probably more than anything else, in my estimation. And so learning to control your emotions and have mastery over them, and to be able to make the decision consciously whether or not you're going to act emotionally or act logically in this moment. Because you can act logically and still be emotional, and that's like ideal. You can go too far and suppress your emotions completely, and then you're a robot. Or you can just act emotionally whenever you feel a certain way and just be an extremely volatile, explosive person that is going to be very hard to be around and is going to find themselves in a lot of unfortunate situations. But best is the middle. I feel a certain way. It's okay to feel this way. Option select. How am I going to respond because I feel this way? I'm going to respond the way that is going to elicit the best possible response from other people for everyone's good, right? It's like, if someone is angry, like if someone's pissed at you, and you go to them and the first thing you do is apologize to them, say, I'm sorry. Like I used to do this all the time when I used to work at this sushi restaurant. I would just do a blanket apology at the end of every day if I saw someone being passive aggressive, as opposed to being like, why are they passive aggressive at the workplace? I hate them. I just go, hey guys, if I made any mistakes tonight, I'm really sorry. I'll do better next time. And it completely neutralizes that passive aggressiveness. And it's like, you can't expect everyone to be mature enough to apologize for what they were responsible for, in a situation like that. But you can only control yourself. And if you don't want other people to be passive aggressive, that worked for me in a great way. And some people will say how, you should never apologize. You're letting them control you because, you didn't do anything wrong. And it's like, the reality is you can always do things better. So it's like, if someone thinks that your transgression was so great and it wasn't, but you apologize anyway for the small aspect of it, You think to yourself, is how I operated tonight perfect? No, it never is. So apologize for the imperfection. I'm sorry. I can do better. There's nothing wrong with that. And chances are it's going to make the work environment or whatever environment you find yourself in much more pleasant and healthy than if you were to kind of dig your heels in and stand your ground and be like, they need to apologize. What they did is wrong. It's like, dude. Just take responsibility for what you're responsible for in every aspect and try to make the situation as healthy as possible for all parties involved by not allowing yourself to act emotionally. Like someone made you angry, someone did something wrong to you, you have to be able to identify whether that person is mature enough to ever be able to accept and to understand that what they did was wrong. If they're not a person that can understand that what they did was wrong, going to them and demanding an apology is only going to make the situation worse. It's like, you need to have healthy boundaries with people, and sometimes the healthy boundaries that you need to have with people is to like not engage with them. But sometimes the people aren't avoidable, like coworkers. You have to engage with coworkers. And in that situation, you have to like be humble. You have to be understanding. You have to be the more mature person in the situation and in all the situations. You know, you need to be as mentally and emotionally mature as you possibly can. Otherwise, things are just going to get worse, and you're going to get more emotionally angry until eventually it explodes into a screaming match. You know, people are manipulating, they're trying to get people on their sides, and they're sneaking around like rats, and they're like, I don't like this guy. He did this one thing and he didn't apologize for it. I'm going to tell you how much you don't like him. I'm going to try to make you not like him. And then if you just, at the moment that seed starts to grow, you go and you go, hey man, I'm sorry. They're like, what? He's sorry? Now I can't be angry at him anymore. You know? Or maybe they can. Maybe they're like, yeah, you need to get your act together. We're like, yeah, I'll do my best. But it's still like, it still nips it in the bud. And there's a million different examples. Those are just the ones that came to mind at first. Anyways, important concept. Hope you enjoyed. As always, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I am not a professional in any of these categories whatsoever. I am not a psychologist. I am not a therapist. I am not a wizard. I am just a dude who thinks about things. Okay, take it easy. Peace.